falling backwards once again. Falling backwards once again. In the street, the people move through the rainy night, more like shadows than humans, walking in their regular way through dark streets and thick black fog, rolling in, closing in around the lights, making them dim so no one could see them clearly at all. And it was at this time I saw an antelope. We began to speak. I spoke with him, and he spoke very softly, as if somehow afraid anyone else hearing would hear what he was saying. It was little wonder, really, because this antelope was making significant negative remarks about the people in the city, comparing all to times gone by when there were shepherds and where there were those who tended the fields nearby, and the interiors of the city buildings and how they were almost at once in the same place. I listened carefully to the antelope, leaning in. I could smell his breath as he spoke of the ones nearby, those who were wet and filthy, rolling near the gutter, and whose eyes were wild and filled with tears, and their teeth were filled with rot, and they were discolored, their teeth were unclean. And I began to see that this antelope possessed a very keen understanding of the human condition in this section of the city, the old section, where humanity made the same mistakes and strived in the same manner and did what they could and what they should until they were so worn and burnt out there was no more energy to do what they had to do. And this antelope had watched this absurd parade for ages, and it came to the conclusion that there was very little, if any, hope for these people. And I merged with him. I merged with him mentally and was just about to voice my agreement when I saw her, the girl I had come into the city to find. She had left the house that morning, crying as she slammed the door. I saw her, the girl that I had come here to look for, to find. And she had been crying, and I wondered, would I ever see her again? And this filled me with such an aching in my heart, and I was so sad, and my whole body was aching, and I looked across, and she was walking with someone else, walking with someone, like she was in love, like a young schoolgirl, holding his hand as if she had known him her whole life. And I looked at her, and she looked at me. She looked right through me. I screamed out her name. I screamed for her. And then she pretended not to recognize me. And for a moment, it was so profound that I thought perhaps it was not her. But it was her. It was the girl. I saw that knowing smile of hers hiding behind the mask of her face. I was sure it was her. I had just last night proposed marriage to her. And she professed her love to me. She said she loved me. Yet truly, when I looked in her eyes, I saw fear, a terrible fear. It was so so deep that her heart nearly rose in her throat, and her skin was the color of dust, was pale and sickly, sick with fear, so much fear that her heart almost burst in her skin. And yet I proposed to her, believe it, saw love and fear so perfectly merged that it shot out brightly in the room, and it exploded as a bomb of blood, coating all the four walls, the ceiling, and the floor with fresh arterial blood and fragments of flesh. And they stuck to the wall, and some forensic scientist would have examined it with pleasure, but another with a purer heart, anyone who had a heart, would see the horror in her face and the tears sliding from her eyes and falling down her cheeks, some being brushed away by fingers with bright red nails moving like a blurred fan in front of full breast, rising, falling, rising, falling, anxious, and the tension growing, and her eyes opening as if shot by a bullet or a bullets. And such sadness on this most beautiful face, a face worthy of Raphael, a face of such purity, such sweetness, and yet filled with crippling fear, a fear, a suicidal fear, where vows erupt, and I proposed to her, and I saw in her eyes love and horror swimming together, swimming naked together. And I reached out and took her face in my hands, and I pulled her mouth toward mine, and I realized that this had all played out before. It had all been shot before. The blood, the heart, the love, all part of human history, turning, spiraling. She, this beautiful girl, is the same who had been stolen by thieves, had been taken hostage, had been taken through the fields to an outpost, like young Marie in the Bresson movie, where the donkey just lies there and weeps, where you can't tell whether the donkey is laughing or crying. As they take Marie, they take her over and over and over, and the same girl that I had proposed to, was taken and brutally beaten and taken over and over, until when the hoodlum slept, she curled into a fetal position and retreated into her own sleep, where dreams came and gave her a chance to escape to a better time and a better place. And she would remember James, the love of her life. James, when she first saw him, he came over to her and he just stared at her for several minutes as if he was in a trance. And she looked at his eyes and she couldn't tell whether he was laughing or crying. Her whole experience, she knew, was just a replay. For James, who she remembered falling in love with, was James also a killer. He had killed 7 women after torturing them. He tortured them and he laughed and cried simultaneously, looking into their eyes that were bright and filled with love and heart. And she looked at him again in a way to see if his face reflected a person who was good and who she could trust. Because in that moment, when he came to her, everything stopped. Time was like gelatin, soft, sweet, without time, infinite, finite, like fallen numbers. And she tried to find that part of him. She looked in his eyes. Could he be a man who was good and be trusted? And it was then that her heart started beating. Her heart started beating so hard, she thought it would explode and shoot blood over all the four walls and ceiling and floor and bits of flesh too, which would stick in some random pattern around the room, and some foresighted scientist would examine it with pleasure. And she saw that everything was in replay. In her, everything was in replay. All of human history. All of human history. Played over and over, making mistakes, changing and trying and building up energy, just as the antelope said. And now she knew he was all ready. She saw he would be. He was very much in that dark forest, and she was very much in the same forest with him. Last night, when he proposed to her, he did propose to her. Vows erupted from his corrupt and beautiful face and came her way and filled her with fear and pleasure. She felt once again the dread, the feeling she could never escape. His grip, he somehow managed to hold her. He somehow managed to hold a part of her, and she just wished with all her might she could just die or fly away to a completely new and different world where she could be safe without fear. She curled in a fetal position when the thieves and hoodlums were sleeping and dreamed. She saw his face and other faces with other names. Saints, murderers, Paul, the dentist, Saint Paul of the flying saucers, Paul, pallor, pallbearers. Her sleep, which began sweetly, kept shifting. She saw a face, one with kindness, another with benevolence, another cruelty. Face upon face, mask upon mask, a multitude of masks, and the history of each face breathing upon her, touching her lips, and history repeating itself and reinventing itself. And the angles, everything, perception, every angle, like a cubist violin playing the saddest song ever heard. Then the sweetest, and then she dreamed of the antelope, whispering. She couldn't make out what he said. She felt the animal closing, pressing against her. But she was not afraid. The merging of human and animal came from far, far away. Somewhere else, further than the universe, from the deepest recesses of human consciousness into unconsciousness, into a void where she could float. There was no animosity, no love. They were pure beings. And then she suddenly knew that that would end, and she would be all too human. And that night was a long one. She realized that truly everything she had experienced, all the horror, was still going on. It had not ended at all. And at any moment, this man could appear once again, this man who disturbed her no end, to the point where she could not breathe. And she fell out of that universe to the floor, and she passed out completely. In that state, the dreams came running in her mind like the herd of antelope, and they ran, and she ran with them, and they went once again into the city, filled with human beings. They, the antelope, professed to dislike, yet always they were drawn to them like iron fillings to a strong magnet. So strong in fact, that many antelope dreamed of pressing themselves hard against human beings in such a way to become one with them, in such a way to become one with them. And many times, human beings that were attacked like this from the antelope, not understanding how the antelope wished this oneness. The human beings lashed out and struck out or shot or strangled the antelope or stabbed the antelope with their jackknives. These jackknives were becoming very popular with the human beings living at this time. Not that they were only antelope to consider. Sometimes they just lashed out against anyone. They put on their leather jackets, these hoodlums, and they started with jackknives and penknives, and then they preferred their switchblades. These switchblades preferred, they pulled out of their shafts, and they walked the streets looking for girls until they found the one, the same one, with eyes filled with love and horror, and they proposed to her as a multitude, and they had their way with her. One by one. And the human beings would nod their heads. Sometimes they would stop. They were so tired. They were so tired even of their own pleasure. And they realized that the antelope was revealing a kind of love between man and animal, human beings and antelope, and sometimes a sexual feeling could arise, as it would be at these times the antelope would leap at the human beings and press itself hard on the human being. And it was this phenomena that she was thinking about, and he was thinking about. They were both thinking about it. James, he who was not James, she who had been proposed to. They looked at one another. They had walked out of separate universes and they fell into a trance. Maybe a minute, maybe an hour went by, and old rock and roll songs spiraled. Bright Persian sky, songs like 1,000 stars, pretty little songs, innocent as a prom dress, innocent as a child's ballet slippers. They saw each other and stepped back, and this trance, starting light and pink, became blue and bluer and bluer, and so sad. They knew what each other was thinking about. He was thinking about the antelope pressing against her body when she suddenly saw his right hand. And it had blood on it, and a deep gash across the thumb and into the palm. She looked at his palm, the nails. She just thought about First Holy Communion and imagined them pushing the nails through the hands of Christ. And he was no Christ, but his palm was bleeding, and it filled her with such compassion. But she knew what he was going to do. Wasn't Christ filled with compassion when he held out his hands, and when they pierced them so deeply? She held out her hands and looked at him. She knew what he would do. she loved him anyway. And he saw that look. It filled him with revulsion, love, fear, swimming naked together. He saw that she had seen the hand, and immediately he left the room and he returned with both their winter coats. "Put this on and come with me," he said. "Come on." They put on their jackets and they descended the stairs. They descended the stairs to the street, and it was cold and dark when they stepped out into the night. And as they went down, she noticed the clock on the bell tower, and it struck midnight. It struck midnight, and then it struck 2 in the afternoon, and then it struck 1:45, struck 8:15. It just kept striking, all different times, all different places, still in the same part of the same city, as it was a long time ago, as it will be a long time coming. "Put your coat on. Come on. Put your coat on and come with me." And she put her coat on. 12 loud clangs echoed out into the city, and she had the strong feeling that she would never hear the clock strike 1. She had the strong feeling of the approaching evil of James, for James had been haunting her dreams more and more these nights, and she shivered even more as they walked up the street. Not as much from the cold, but from the chilling thoughts rushing through her mind. Because hadn't she put her coat on before? Hadn't she put her coat on before, and hadn't he said, "Hey, put your coat on"? And they went down the stairs, and the clock, she heard the clangs. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But she knew she would never hear it strike 1 again. And they rounded the corner, and thoughts were rushing, and her heart started pounding as they rounded the corner. Her heart started pounding. They rounded the corner at a point where much of the city could be seen below. And he turned and looked at her, and she looked at him anew. And it was him. Of course, it was James. He must have followed her this afternoon. He still had the key. And she had noticed blood on the front of the doorknob, and it was all coming clear now. And he was staring at her, just staring. And it seemed to go on for so long. The trance, like when they first met. And he said, "Just like old times." What? What? Can't you just leave tried to move, but the growing fear rippled through her and she staggered. And she fell. She fell to the ground. A white deer was dancing in her eyes. No, not a deer, fear. It was the same. James leaned over her and reached for her throat with both hands. She pushed him away, screaming, not with her mouth, but with her eyes, now white hot, as if she had only glowing white eyes. Her mouth opened like a torn hole in her bloodless face. He pulled out his jackknife. He flipped it open with a quick, violent motion, and then he arched his arm back and went to stab her in the chest, and both of her hands flew out defensively. Her hands flew out. She offered them to him. She offered him the hands that had been offered all through time, in supplication, in fear, in vindication, in surrender. And he went to stab her in the chest. He pulled out his jackknife and flipped it open with a quick, violent motion, and then arched his arm back and went to stab her in the chest. Both her hands flew out defensively, and the knife sliced her fingers, then entered into her chest, and so violently did he plunge the knife that his hand slid when the knife struck bone, and he sliced his right hand deeply through the thumb and the palm. The antelope approached now. James turned and ran. The antelope leaned in, and she could almost feel his breath on her face and smell him. He was so close. She could not tell whether the antelope was laughing or crying, but he spoke very softly to her, once again making significant negative remarks about the people in this part of the city.